can at least show that part.
We'll just wing it without the notes. How's that?
Well, how about, wing it, yeah, go ahead. Probably given us before.
All right. Well, sorry for the delay, folks. We tested it a little bit this afternoon, but it's not just working exactly the same. But thank you all so much for being here. I have a lot of familiar faces in the audiences. Master naturalists are always one of my favorite groups to speak with. And we're so happy to visit with y'all today and all throughout the year. Great partners of UGRA. So I'll just start with a little bit of background about the Upper Guadalupe River Authority. We're established by the legislature, created in 1939, and our jurisdiction is just Kerr County, and we're funded by Kerr County property tax dollars. And we have a 9-member board of directors who are appointed by the governor. I'm so happy to have our board president, Bill Rector, here with us tonight, which was very nice for him to come and support and visit with us all. And river authorities are a weird thing throughout Texas. They're all a little bit different. A lot of them are large wholesale water providers or retail water providers or operate wastewater infrastructure. Some are also electric utilities as well. But for you, and UGRA was first established and then really started to grow into our main activities in the 70s, where we acquired funds to be able to construct the original Nimitz Dam that is in Kerrville, which is our main water supply impoundment. And UGRA constructed the water plant as well, and established the first ASR. And then in the 90s, all of those assets were sold to the city. And since then, that's really allowed us to have more of a stewardship role in the community. To be able to, we'll just go to the, you don't need to see my notes. We'll just go right to the slides. That's fine. To be through our programs, we participate in many of our regional planning supplies, and we have a lot of stewardship programs that we're going to talk about a little bit later on today. So partnerships are key to our activities. We are privileged to be able to partner with many entities in the community, including the master naturalists. And when you're talking about water, it's always very easy to find partnerships. So I wanted to start off with just kind of a review of our surface and our groundwater resources in Kerr County. We're lucky that we have both, and certainly water is of top importance lately, with the focus on the drought as well as our growth as well. Okay, so if we just, when we're talking about river basins and our surface water resources, we're looking at a map of Texas. Let's see, no, I'm having trouble getting the pointer here. Okay, that was a lot easier. So we can divide the entire state into different river basins. So we're right here in this orangish one, Basin 11, which is the Guadalupe River Basin. And it's about 6,000 square miles and spans from about central Texas all the way to the coast. And I know that with Master Naturalists, some of y'all are in different parts of the state or in different parts of the region. So you might be Gillespie County or Bandera County, Kendall County. So just let me know if because I am kind of always Kerr County centric in my comments, since that's where UGRA operates. But I'm happy to see if I can answer questions about some of our neighboring areas as well. All right, so just kind of a zoom up, it's closer in on the Guadalupe River Basin. It travels, we're here in Kerr County up at the headwaters where the river starts. And then if we follow every one of those twists and turns all the way down from the headwaters in Kerr County to the Gulf, we're going to follow about 400 miles. And we have a very privileged position up here in the headwaters. And just zooming in a little bit more on Kerr County itself, you can really see where the other watersheds come into our county as well. So most of the land area in Kerr County contributes to the Guadalupe River, is part of the Guadalupe River Basin. And again, we outline those river basins based on the concept of a watershed. So all along where I'm outlining the boundary of our river basin are high points in elevation. And so when it rains out here on the divide, if you're a little bit to the west, the rain is going to go down into the Llano River watershed towards Junction. or a little bit to the east, we're going to be in the Guadalupe Basin. So some parts of Kirk County do drain towards our neighboring river basins, but the vast majority is within the Guadalupe. And then just kind of outlining that river basin with our main bodies of water. Hunt is the official start of the Guadalupe River, and it's at the confluence of the North Fork of the Guadalupe River, the South Fork. And then when we add Johnson Creek and Ingram, those three bodies of water really contribute to the majority of the flow that we see in the Guadalupe River and Kerrville. So when we're talking about rain that's going to have a beneficial impact on the river in Kerrville, we're really always looking out west. We want to see how much it rains out towards Hunt, out towards Mountain Home and Ingram, because that's what's going to have the biggest impact on stream flow of the river in Kerrville. And just in case you haven't had a chance to drive all through the river basin throughout the county, the environment of the river really changes from one end of the county to the other. So this is out on the headwaters of the North Fork of the Guadalupe River, out upstream of Moe Ranch. So you really see these steep canyon sides and kind of a narrow body of water there. And then you can contrast that with the South Fork, where we have a lot of wider sections, like we have this flat bottom area upstream of River Inn Crossing, where it might only be ankle deep all the way across. And then that Nimitz Dam, which is our main water supply reservoir in Kerrville, is right there at Guadalupe Street. And you can see the City of Kerrville water plant over here. So it kind of creates a lake environment upstream and a river environment downstream. And then out towards Center Point, the river kind of braids its way through these gravel-rich sections as well before it ends up towards Comfort and leaving Kirk County. So switching to groundwater, aquifers are that water holding portion of the geologic formation or of the rock. We have 9 main aquifers in Texas. So whenever you see an aquifer map, it's always showing what is on the surface, which is hard to wrap your brain around because you're talking about pumping groundwater. Your well, your pump is hundreds of feet underground, and it may actually be in a different aquifer than what's on the surface because the aquifers wedge over one another. And we certainly see that here in our area in Kirk County. If you look, the eastern part of Kirk County is that light green, which is the Edwards Trinity Plateau aquifer. That's your more karst rock the water's going to move more quickly through. So when we get rain out in the west, it might come down, kind of soak in a little ways into that Edwards formation, and then start moving laterally towards our river. And we have the Trinity aquifer in the east, which is that darker green. And again, they're kind of wedging over each other. The Edwards has eroded off on the eastern section through thousands of years of water and air and activity. And then we have, as water started to travel through those main lines of the river, it eroded it off further. So our springs start to pop out where those two different rock formations meet. So we've got, again, that rains, that water kind of travels laterally through the Edwards, and then it'll come to an area where the Edwards is totally gone, and it's at the top of the Trinity or the Glen Rose, and it starts to flow across the land. It's not going to penetrate down further. And those are our springs that start our river. So that red dot is the headwater springs of the Guadalupe River on the North Fork, about across the gate from the Kerr Wildlife Management Area. So again, that white rock on the top is that Edwards formation, and then the riverbed right here is the top of the Trinity, the Glen Rose, and the water is coming out from that space in between. And certainly we access our groundwater through a well, and those are much, much deeper. And where most of us are getting our groundwater from the Trinity aquifer, if we're talking about our larger municipal wells or your community wells, are going to be in the Trinity, and a lot of our household wells. Additionally, those are not recharging as quickly, and they don't contribute as much to spring flow. And these are some core samples from wells, and you can see how, just looking like solid rock, but if we poured water on there, it would soak in. So there's tiny little holes in that rock where water is stored. And when you pull out that well core, when a well is drilled and have your pump go down in there, it's pumping the water that has kind of leaked in from the walls of the neighboring rock. So see, and if you drive down I-10 and look at the road cuts that you drive through, where you just had, you can see the different layers. So when you start to look at those and think about, it just can pique your curiosity with our geology. So most communities have our first two water resources, surface water and groundwater. But in Kerrville, we also have aquifer storage and recovery, reuse, and then throughout the county, rainwater harvesting as well. So aquifer storage and recovery is a type of well that the city of Kerrville uses. That's when the river is running higher than normal, which it has not been in quite a while, they will pump additional water and treat it to drinking water standards and then inject it into this special or identified location in the geologic formation where that water is going to kind of reliably stay so that it can be extracted out at a later date. So currently, well, I'm not sure today how much they have, but that they have about 800 million gallons of water in the ASR wells the last time I checked. And then they'll generally pump that to take a little bit of pressure off our groundwater and our surface water resources during the summer. And reuse is also a water resource that we have in Kerrville, and it's really a one water strategy. So the wastewater treatment plant, the city of Kerrville treats, you flush your toilets, you run the sink anywhere in the city of Kerrville, all that water goes to the wastewater treatment plant. It's treated to a standard that they're permitted by the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, and then that effluent or that recycled water can be released back into Third Creek and then go into the Guadalupe River. So that's done all throughout the state, all throughout the country, a normal way that we manage wastewater. Then it goes back into those receiving water bodies. In addition, the city of Kerrville can also send some of that water to this reuse pond, which is off of Spur 100 over by the Veterans Cemetery on the eastern side of town. And then that storage pond, that water can be then moved to all of our athletic fields at Tybee High School, as well as the sports complex on Holdsworth, and then several golf courses. So it's an excellent one water strategy because you're using the right water for the right purpose. You know, drinking water is our highest quality resource that we have. So when there's an opportunity to use some water other than our highest quality of water, especially if it's putting it out on the ground, then taking advantage of that is a great one water strategy. So reuse water, rainwater harvesting, or say capturing stormwater runoff for later reuse. Those are all examples. And then raise your hand if you have rainwater harvesting at home. I think we'll get a pretty good response here. Yes. So that's a practice that can be scaled to any household, any building, any budget. You might have room for a 50-gallon barrel, or you might want a 20, 30, 40,000 gallon system to feed to meet all of your household needs. And rainwater harvesting is a beneficial practice for two main reasons. I mean, the obvious one is that you're, again, conserving water. You're not pumping water out of a well from the aquifer. You're not using city water, for example, that might have come from the Guadalupe River. You're capturing that from your own property. But another is that it also reduces stormwater runoff. So when it rains, you get that big slug of water that comes down first. And if we're able to intercept some of that and hold on to it, then that's less water that's going to run off into the streets, potentially pick up pollutants along the way and end up in our water bodies. So rainwater harvesting kind of fulfills both of those needs. All right. You know, the amount of these water resources or the quantity certainly important to meeting the needs of people in Texas and of the health of our ecosystem. So, you know, how are we doing right now? I think we all know our current status is drought. If we look at the last 15 years of rainfall, this was a summary we put together for our year in review publication. You know, we've had 5 years over 10 inches or below. 10 inches below average, I'm sorry. And then just 1 year that's been over 10 inches above average. And we look at our kind of 30-year running average of rainfall, and it's trending down in the last few years. Flow of the Guadalupe River has certainly been below average as well. So out of the last 15 years, we've just had 1 that we would consider a wet year, and then 3 that were certainly drought years. And the way that that's impacted the flow of the Guadalupe River, average flow of the river is tough because if you get one big monster flood event, that's going to throw off your average. But the last 5 years, without a doubt, have been well below long-term flow. And we look at flow as cubic feet per second. So the flow of the river today, I didn't look, but it is probably about 15 to 20 cubic feet per second, and normal this time of year would be closer to about 70. And if you could picture a cubic foot is about the size of a basketball. So if you went out there and stood at the river, you know, how many basketballs of water are going by you for any second? And if we look at the whole year, all of the most recent years, about 115 cubic feet per second is what would be on average all year round. And the last 5 years have been below that. And similar trends for groundwater as well. The Headwaters Groundwater Conservation District has monitoring wells throughout the county, and they use 4 of them to create an index that they link to what drought category they're going to be in. So they changed one of the wells that went into this calculation about 4 years ago. So that's why the data here only goes back to the beginning of 2023. I think it was, they brought on that new well in 2022, so only 2 years ago. So it looks more or less flat, which we might think is good if we're talking about, right? No, not big increases or decreases, but we really do like to see, and historically have seen, more recovery in the winter months. So in the winter, you're not having your demands from irrigation or from natural vegetation. So we might see some rebounds, some area, sometimes, you know, around December, January, February, where those lines really go up quite a bit. And then they might come down again in the summer. So we haven't seen those rebounds in the last few years. And then certainly summer of 2023 was a low point for groundwater as the peak of our most recent drought. The U.S. Drought monitors an index that is generated on a weekly basis, and it gauges the drought in areas throughout the country. And as drought increases, the color also increases in intensity. More towards this dark red would be our most severe category of drought. So we, in the spring, in May, we really don't want to already be in our most severe drought category. And this image on the left is from a year ago. So the drought has continued to increase in the last year. I mean, some good news is that April and May rainfall has been, pretty much normal, whatever that is, but we're going to need far more than just average rainfall in order to recoup those drought conditions. And I would say if we look just at rainfall in Kirk County, that our current drought probably started in about December of 2021. And we haven't been out of this either a moderate drought to exceptional drought since December of 2021 for Kirk County. And then NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, also puts together predictions. So the 3-month prediction for the U.S. is, our area is going to have above average temperature and a little bit below average rainfall. So that's an improvement. The last couple of summers we've seen the prediction has been drastically below average rainfall. Part of that might be that the El Nino cycle has left La Nina, which means hot and dry for us, and we're currently in neutral. So if we could look for some good news, that would be a little bit of it. Again, thinking back to that kind of our oscillation between drought and flood, you really can think of it as a spectrum, right? And so most of the time in our area, that needle is really pointing towards that drought side of the scale, but every once in a while we do get a flood. So let's talk a little bit about some of our historic floods that we've had. So Flash Flood Alley is a designation, kind of a swath across Texas that all runs kind of along I-35 and includes a large number of people in this flash flood alley. And we're about where that yellow star is today. And our area certainly contributes to that because of our steep topography that is pushing all that water right towards cities like New Braunfels in the Guadalupe Basin. And this is, again, an outline of the Guadalupe River Basin in gray there. You know, we're about here in Kerrville. Here's that western edge of Kerr County out by the divide. Again, the South Fork, the North Fork, and Johnson Creek water bodies. That red line kind of goes from the top of our watershed down to Canyon Lake. And it's about 80 miles long. And over that 80 miles, it drops from 2,400 feet above sea level in elevation all the way to 976. So that is a very steep water slide that the water is going on from Kerr County down into Canyon Lake. And at Riverside Nature Center several years ago, when they had this as an exhibit, and I thought it was a really powerful graphic. So it's a scaled elevation change from up here at the divide at about 2,400 feet in elevation down to around Hunt, where we start to see the North Fork and the South Fork starting to flow consistently. Now it drops about 600 feet in elevation over that area. And then where the river flows from the headwaters down to where we are in Kerrville, you know, we're dropping another 300 plus feet. So across our, you know, maybe straight line distance, 35, 40 miles from Kerrville to the west, you know, we're losing 800 feet in elevation just in that area. So when the water gets moving, it's very powerful, and it can cause a lot of damage. So when floods occur, there are some ecological benefits to it, right? We're a flash flood prone region, and our vegetation and our ecosystems have evolved to that. Certainly water is provided out into the floodplain, right? When the river leaves the channels, goes out into the floodplain, it's kind of adding water to that riparian sponge area from the top side. So that's a good thing. It also can spur the growth of some plants and animals. Certain species of fish will spawn based on the cycles of the floods. And so that doesn't happen when it doesn't flood. And things just get mixed up, right? Nutrients get carried from one place to another. Sediment does as well, seeds, and that diversity just enhances the ecosystem of our area. But then, of course, the negative side of that is the destruction. These are some pictures from the Wimberley area from 2016, which was a particularly devastating flood. Lives were lost, millions of dollars in property damage, stranded residents, you know, even things like displaced wildlife, and then just damage to the stream area itself. So some significant floods for Kerr County or for the upper Guadalupe River. July 1900 is listed. We don't have any gauging information, right? We didn't have our stream flow gauges then, but there are some estimates that was a very intense flood. Certainly 1932, we have photographic record of that flood in Kerrville, of water getting up to where the courthouse lawn is. August 1978, very devastating for Comfort, particularly because the water came down Verde Creek very intensely, about 20 inches, I believe, right in that watershed, then right towards Comfort. And if you're interested in learning more about that flood, Betty Murphy is a wonderful resource in Comfort, and she's compiled some personal narratives of folks that lived through that flood. I have a couple of copies of her book if you want to look at it. And then just for perspective, the river did come up last July. And if you haven't lived here, you know, more than 10 years, that probably seems like a pretty big flood. But the cubic feet per second of that event was about 14,000. And it only registers as a minor flood, if we're going to know it, or National Weather Service categorizes them. So really doesn't even come close to touching any of these historic floods. So some pictures. This is from the Bluebonnet Hotel, which is approximately where the pavilion is on Water Street that overlooks Louise Hayes Park. So that's looking down into the Guadalupe River where Louise Hayes Park is now. The Sidney Baker Bridge wasn't built yet, but that would be right about here I think. So about 35 inches of rain in 36 hours. Then again, that 1978 flood, 15 to 20 inches in that Verde Creek watershed. And we had about 16 inches in Kerrville. And here's this is in Louise Hayes Park. So this is the Sidney Baker Bridge here. And during the night, I believe the water was up at its highest in 1978 and that it lapped the bottom of the bridge here. So this picture was taken after it started to come down. Still very ill-advised for those young boys to be out there. But and then July of 1978 was very tragic for our area, because this was a kind of the classic wall of water example that was just devastating for a group of children in Comfort who were at the Pot of Gold summer camp, and the bus left with the kids, and it was blue sky, not raining in Comfort, but it had rained about 10 inches overnight up towards Hunt. And so that water came down as a wall of water and swept that bus off of the the old Herman Sons Bridge. And then in Kerrville, these are some pictures that were taken in Kerrville of that 1987 flood. This is Nimitz Dam here. Yes, yes, Jenny. Yes, I don't want to misspeak on the number, but I believe it was 12 or 15. It wasn't everybody. Yeah. So this is the Nimitz Dam Bridge. Like here's Guadalupe Park, which is y'all's river cleanup location. So you can't even see the structure of the dam at all. And this is just a view from the other side. Again, 1987, this was taken in Louise Hayes Park. So here's that Sidney Baker Bridge. And this was a picture just from last July in Louise Hayes Park. So this is the little dam that is in Louise Hayes Park. You could see this picture was taken from the pavilion looking down in there. So, I mean, it looks like the river's roaring, but to think that this is just minor compared to some of those historic floods we've had. And 5 days before this happened, this is what it looked like there. And unfortunately, in July of 2024, about 20 days, 15, 20 days after the river looked like this, it looked like this again. And the U.S. Geological Survey stream flow gauge is our main instrument that we have for measuring and tracking flow in the river. This one is located by Guadalupe Park. And so the river flowing at about 4 cubic feet per second, which would be a critically low flow for the Guadalupe River. Again, that long-term average would be closer to 100. So before we got that rain in July, you know, it was pretty low, peaked up. That's a classic flash flood. You know, the water comes straight up within a few hours and then comes straight back down. And then, you know, here, August 19th, so about 3 weeks later, we're all the way back to that critically low flow again. So just we'll put some pictures on there to kind of show that comparison. So the flood pictures get more oohs and ahs, I think, than the drought ones, because like how much drier can a dry river get? But we'll look at a couple to depress ourselves a bit. If we rank rainfall, the top 10 driest years in Kerrville, and rainfall, you know, is quite variable. As we'll often hear, well, I didn't even get that much at my house, or I got twice as much. That we use the USDA's weather station that they have at their by insect research lab up there on 16, just north of I-10. So that's our consistent rainfall point that we use. So 2022 was even drier than 2011 for Kerr County, not by much, but close. And then we get into a couple of years in the 50s as well, which across the state is still considered our drought record. So these are some pictures in 2011. This is Nimitz Dam again, there on Guadalupe Street. So no water flowing over the dam. The city is pumping water from the side in order to maintain their required downstream flows. And then we see many of the cypress stumps of the trees that were cut when the reservoir was created, that those were exposed as that water level came down. Look, if you go across G Street often and you look downstream, that's a good kind of barometer of flow for the river, I think, because it's a very, there's some noticeable landmarks there. So this is summer of 2011, and this is summer of 2022. So similar, maybe even a little bit worse in 22. And we also have seen that a lot of vegetation in those intervening 10 years has grown in the river channel because we haven't had flows, we haven't had flood events to kind of push that sediment downstream. So when vegetation becomes established because you have such low flows, then sometimes it's just there permanently unless we really get a big flood. And then these were some pictures that Aaron Yates took and posted. This is looking upstream at that G Street bridge. So the only flow was just over here on that left bank. And then that was the main river. This is Town Creek. So there wasn't even any water in a lot of our tributaries into the main river. And those were dry for a much longer period of time. So, totally dry creek bed there, Town Creek, along Old Town Creek Road. Okay, so that kind of sets the stage for our water resource. We can't make it rain, so we focus on improving what we have, and we do that through monitoring and data collection and analysis. That's certainly important, but also increasing the use of best management practices or stewardship strategies that are going to help take better care of our water resources. So that really, we try to encourage and incentivize stewardship as much as we can. We focus a great deal on education and involving people in the community in our programs so that y'all can make choices on your own properties that are going to help improve our resources as well. So we focus a lot on how do we slow the water down and how do you get it to sink in, not run off, and just use less. Those 4 concepts. And that message is tailored whether we're talking to a group of urban landowners or rural landowners. In our urban areas, we focus a lot on the practices that you can see in our edgescape or our landscaping around this building, which are slowing that water down. So using things like terracing or berms when you have a slope in order to create areas for the water to soak in, so it's not just running off down the hill. And then breaking up areas of impervious cover through things like permeable pavers as well. And then certainly rainwater harvesting is an approach that works for any household to reduce runoff and also conserve water. And in our rural areas, it's focused more on vegetation, reducing runoff by creating areas where the water can soak in more and not run off, erode, and take away that our resource of soil. So having land cover with vegetation and also deep-rooted vegetation as well, that is going to help create more areas for water to soak in. So bare soil is the enemy for sure. And here's a little play on words. I'm sure I stole this picture from Steve Nelly years ago. We call it a watershed, but we really don't want it to shed water. We want it to capture water. So kind of two neighbors managing both sides of the fence differently. I hope that we all would rather prefer have this property over here with our long, deep-rooted grasses. If you have a hard rainstorm, this is going to look identical before or after the rain, whereas here you'll see runoff rills and eroded areas as well. And then if you're lucky enough to have property along a body of water, you can be a riparian steward by taking care of that unique blend of vegetation that is along our waterways that provides so many benefits to holding on to those riverbanks, protecting erosion, and really enhancing that riparian sponge so that it can release water back into the river during times when it's not raining. And there's many tools available to landowners to manage your property. You are certainly your greatest tool. So by learning what you can do, talking with others, sharing those ideas, being that master naturalist is an enormous step in the right direction. You are a tremendous source of knowledge to each other and to your larger community too. And y'all know that, and you do a wonderful job sharing what you know through all of the community events that you're a part of. And your NRCS office, as well as AgriLife, almost every county has one. Those are great resources, and they often have incentive programs or just educational programs that you can attend or be involved in. And, sometimes inactivity is the best strategy. If you have an area that you want to, we all often want to get in there and approach our land the same way you would a flower bed, where you can go to Lowe's and get everything you needed and one day, transform it. And it's exactly the way you like it. But if you're talking about a riparian area or a larger native grass part of your property, not mowing it and leaving it the way it is, maybe helping it a little bit by removing invasive species, creating structure through terracing where you can, and then just letting it sit and just leaving it to recover. Those are sometimes the best strategies. I love the Master Naturalist Land Management Assistance Program and also your Pollinator Garden Assistance Program, where you're going out in the community and kind of guiding people along with their stewardship. Those are excellent programs. Hill Country Alliance, it's not on this slide, but they recently released an HOA guidelines tool that if you are part of an HOA and maybe serve in leadership through the HOA board, Hill Country Alliance has put together a landscaping guidelines that could be incorporated into your HOA governing documents that would be more along a stewardship ethic and not let's all maintain our yards or our lawns in a certain way. So if that might be of help to you, just let me know and I can get you the link to that resource. And I love this quote. I'm not sure where it came from, but stewardship isn't a list of practices. It's a person's connection with the land. So when you have that connection and you foster it, that's really how you show your stewardship more than ticking off certain practices. And conservation easements have been a topic that we receive more and more questions about, how they could be a tool to help protect open space and help protection of the function of a watershed by keeping the river flowing and really preserving the cultural heritage of the land. And a conservation easement is a voluntary written agreement between a landowner and an organization called a land trust, where you're giving away essentially some rights to your property, usually the development rights or the right to subdivide that property in a future in perpetuity. And they are tailor-made for each circumstance. If you want to be able to have building envelopes across your property, homestead, say, for each of your family members in the future, you can do that. You want to have agricultural development or hunting. I mean, those are all definite yes with conservation easements. It is really more about not being able to subdivide or develop property in the future. And we have many, many different land trusts that work in our area. And if that is something that you might be interested in, I encourage you just to reach out and talk with one of them. I found that the land trusts really want it to be a mutually beneficial relationship. And if their type of land trust isn't going to meet the needs of what you want, they will find you another one that is maybe more appropriate for how you want to manage your property in the future. And we have several incentive programs that we offer at UGRA. Probably our most popular one is the rainwater rebate program. So if you're a Kerr County resident, you can get rebated 50% of what you spend on equipment for rainwater harvesting, up to $500. And then we also have a rainwater harvesting grant for nonprofits, public entities, schools, to install a rainwater catchment system, and that can be up to $15,000. We've been working with Schreiner University on a program to encourage students that are interested in kind of water resource fields through a scholarship program. And then for the development community, we have our Water Resources Preservation Grant Program. An example of one of those projects is a bioretention area at the new City of Kerrville Public Safety Facility that we're funding that bioretention area because it is going to mitigate runoff that's coming off one of those parking lots. And then, which Phil did kind of steal my thunder a bit in his very creative stall as we we're working out our tech problems. You can also show your stewardship by partnering with other organizations like UGRA. Again, you're a highly skilled group as master naturalists, and many of y'all join us as volunteers in our summer study program, as well as our river cleanup. That is a way for you to achieve volunteer hours and also give service for Texas Water Specialist Program as well. So our volunteer summer study has been around for over 20 years, and we ask interested members of the community to collect a water sample at a creek or a place of location along the river that you're familiar with or that you drive by frequently, and bring that water sample to UGRA. And that helps to complement the routine sampling that we're already doing for bacteria. We focus on E. coli bacteria because it's an indicator of the recreational health of the water body. So we have E. coli can indicate that there might be something more severe going on. If we have very elevated levels, possibly there was, we've seen it from everything. Maybe there's a wastewater, a sewer infrastructure problem, right? That could be identified. Maybe there's a large group of buzzards that is roosting right over the river, and that can really impact the bacteria in that area. So often that E. coli will be our first indication that something isn't quite right. So what we would ask is that you collect a weekly sample, at least 5 samples from June to August, in Kerr County in the Guadalupe River, one of the tributaries. We'll train you how to do that and how to fill out the paperwork. And then you bring that sample to the UGRA lab, and also ask that you kind of share your observations and your comments on the conditions of that location. So these are the results from last year's summer study. We had 35 volunteers who collected about 400 water samples at 48 locations throughout Kerr County. And exactly like Phil said, the areas that had elevated bacteria levels were some of our smaller tributaries that had very low flow, and especially our tributaries in our urban areas. And it's very easy to sign up. If you are interested in doing it, I encourage you to sign up this week because your supply pickup day is on Friday. Just go to our website, ugra.org, and in this major initiative sections, we have the volunteer summer study. And then there's a link to fill out that online registration. And it just asks you some, name, email address, and it asks you to select a possible sampling location. And so this link will take you to a map that is color coded with all of those orange are confirmed sampling locations that we have already for 2025. And then the green are possible ones that are still available. And then that map shows as well the locations where we're routinely taking samples already. And so there are other main program that we often have the privilege of working with master naturalists in is our annual river cleanup. And so these are my instructions for the river cleanup. Because she will tell you everything you need to know and give you your marching orders, and you'll be all set. But if Deb isn't available, this is copied out of the email she sent me that she tells everybody. And
she'll talk about it next month. Before all this.
But again, it's a very easy form to go to on our website. The annual river cleanup is July 26th. And for many, many years, Hill Country Master Naturalists have had a team and generally clean up at Guadalupe Park. So again, you just go to our homepage, ugra.org, and you scroll down just a little bit and you'll see this box and this registered for today. Again, it's going to take you to an outside Google form to register. And you'll just fill out your name, your email address. It'll ask you what group you're with. Matthew, who organizes the program, any variation of Master Naturalist, Deb's group, HCMN, any of those, and we'll get you in the right place. And then your location is already set as Guadalupe Park. So you would put that in there as well. And I just wanted to finish by mentioning our environmental lab is a resource for our entire region. Our natural resources department at UGRA brings all of our samples that we take on the river to our lab. They do all of our routine surface water quality monitoring testing, and they're also a contract lab for our Clean Rivers program. They're certified by the state of Texas for doing water samples that can be used to meet permit requirements, like for public water systems or wastewater systems. But they also are a resource for homeowners with private wells. And they stay very busy. Last year, they ran about a little over 23,000 tests. And that is their entire staff there in the lab. There's 3 folks. We have a couple other people that help with admin. They served over 300 public water systems from Del Rio all the way out to Sonora, and then certainly in our immediate area as well. And they ran 2,400 tests on the river for our natural resources department. And they're a wonderful resource too for just general questions about water quality. They like it when you ask them weird things that they'll get to research, and they just want to be a resource for you. So if you need water testing, I encourage you to talk to our lab. We're very proud of them. And so with that, I apologize again for our initial technical difficulties, but happy to answer any questions.
That's actually good timing here. Does anyone have any questions? I'll give you the mic.
Hi, Tara. That was an excellent overview of
It's nice to see you again.
what you've been doing and what you continue to do. And my question's more about the future. Given that with 3 ring data, it suggests that we're headed into a severe or more severe drought as the 1950s, and it's going to last a while. And all these efforts that are being done, what impact that will be relative to the pressures of growth on water supplies in this community?
I can't say, oh, we've got everything buttoned up and we're going to be just fine. I don't have a crystal ball, but certainly doing what you can is better than nothing. As in Kerr County, the city of Kerrville is our largest water supplier and our largest water user as well. And they have invested a lot into their long range water plans, and have also surveyed the community. I'll say if you're tomorrow at 6:30 at the Arcadia, they're going to share some of the comments that they generated from there. But our area isn't estimated to have as intense growth as along the I-35 corridor, luckily. So that is going to be the parts of Texas that are going to be even more critical as far as meeting demand and meeting growth. I think that we are okay, but we certainly have to keep doing what we're doing and keeping a focus on it as well, and communicating what you want for your community with your elected officials and being engaged through the public meetings that all of your entities that are part of the management of our resources have as well. A crystal ball, but that's what I got.
So would in Kendall County, is there a chance to volunteer for?
They don't like that there. No, I don't know. Deb, you're more tuned into the Kendall County community than I am. Certainly through the South Llano Watershed Alliance. Did I get that right? No, it's not right. The Friends of the Pedernales. Yes, Pedernales River Alliance organization is that many of your members are a part of, would be a good place to start. I don't know. The River Authority for Gillespie County is technically the Lower Colorado River Authority. That's within their jurisdiction, but they don't have, I would say, an office in Gillespie County. So there are not similar programs to ours necessarily.
A good lead in. Next month, we'll be hearing more about the Pedernales River Alliance.
Okay.
And the watersheds north of here. And I'm sure that if you're interested in the cleanup and you haven't done that before, Deb will give you all the details of that one.
Yes.
This is from Zoom.
Oh.
The water recapture treatment program stinks up the whole east end of town. Who would we speak to about mitigating the stench of the poop loop?
Wow, I hadn't heard that colorful. Well, I will say those are City of Kerrville operated facilities, and we have city council meeting every 2 weeks. And so communicating through public comment, and when you have a chance to talk with one of the council members would be a great place to start.
Any other questions or things you'd like to hear next week about other parts of the chapter areas or anything so we can be prepared next week?
Next month, right?
Or
Not
next
gonna
month,
keep it-
what did I say, next week?
This is a lot
It's-
to
It
put on
seems
on
like
a
it's every
weekly
week.
basis.
No, it's fine. Thank you. And let's give it up for Tara Bushnoe. That was excellent. Can I say your parents raised you right or something?
They did, there was way back there.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. That's our program for tonight. Any final words from anyone? Free advertising? No? Cheryl? Okay, we're done. Thank you. See you next month. Take care.